Welcome to the Cocktail Guru Podcast,
a show about food, drink, and entertainment,
with a tight focus on the good life.
and all things delicious, luxurious, and fun.
I'm Jonathan Pogash, bartender, author, TV personality, and founder of the Cocktail Guru.
And I'm Jeffrey Pogash, wine and spirits professional, author, insatiable collector of culinary ephemera, and so people tell me, an engaging raconteur.
And my dad. Okay, another episode of the Cocktail Guru Podcast. Here we are serving it up. It is on your plate. This is quite a dish that we have prepared for today. I don't know why I went on that little rant just now.
Well, this is going to be delectable because of where this podcast is coming from.
That's right, folks. We're
coming
actually
from one of the great gastronomic regions of the world.
I know. I guess that's why I'm thinking about food, because we're actually going to travel. We're going to travel to Italy today, ladies and gentlemen, and we're just going to have a blast, and we're going to be transported there, and we're going to talk about food and wine. And Dad, you've got a glass of Prosecco, I assume.
Well, no, it's champagne.
Just say it's Prosecco. Just say nobody will know. Nobody knows.
I don't have Prosecco. I was looking for some, but I don't have it, so I took champagne instead.
Oh, okay.
Well, in honor of our guest.
That's okay. Méthode champenoise. So we have our next guest. Let's go. Let's do the intro, and we'll bring him on, and we'll get right to the to chatting. How about that?
Well, that's great, because our next guest is a one of a kind. He is one of a kind because he is the first wine importer that we have ever interviewed on our podcast.
That is true.
He's an American who's been living in Italy for the last 15 years, but I think living in Europe for about 20 or so.
The last 15 years.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes,
15, right? Yeah, 14, 15.
His Thank you, John. His wife is Italian, and they live in one of the most beautiful and bountiful and romantic cities on earth, Florence.
Oh, yes. I love Florence. Firenze. And we're going to bring our guest on in just a quick moment. We're going to take a quick break.
There's nothing better than the smell of coffee in the morning. What if you could enjoy a coffee subscription of fresh, roasted specialty coffee while making a difference in the lives of the farmers that grow it? What if you also had access to a virtual coffee community of other coffee lovers and the coffee farmer and roaster? That's all part of the Farm to Cup Coffee Club subscription at Unleashed Coffee. Subscribe today. UnleashedCoffee.com.
And now we're back. Mr. Ernest Ifkovitz is the founder of PortoVino. It's a company that imports small growers and producers, all of whom have a penchant for producing natural and, in some cases, biodynamic wines. They are from Sardinia, Emilia-Romagna in Italy, the Pfalz region of Germany. There's so much more to tell, but we have him on, and we want him to give us a little bit of a lowdown on his company and the producers, his favorite producers, and maybe we can talk about cheese and olive oil and pasta and risotto and parmigiano and prosciutto.
Oh, I hope
prosciutto.
So.
Hello.
And maybe tartufo.
Maybe tartufo.
Well.
Buongiorno, Ernest. How are you?
Buongiorno. Wow, that was quite the introduction. I appreciate that. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's great to have you, and welcome to our little podcast. Where we often talk about cocktails, often talk about spirits. It's only in recent weeks that we've started talking about wine, as a matter of fact, because wine happens to be one of my great and first loves, because I spent the first 18 years of my career in the wine industry. And then I got sidetracked into the spirits and cocktail world. Yeah. And now we're coming back full circle, coming around. And talking about wine. And we'd love to know more about your producers and what you do and how all of this came about.
But before we do that, we always ask our guests, what is your desert island drink if you're stranded?
Water. That's easy.
Yeah.
That's smart. That's the smartest answer we've ever received, I think. Yeah. So, Ernest, we wanted to talk more about how you created PortoVino, and how you made it to Italy from the U.S.
Yeah, it was it was a long journey.
Yes.
I originally was from the States, from the suburbs of Philadelphia, and
Mm.
I just kind of got into reading literature and books, and it all came back to Rome. And so, it was one of the places that I wanted to visit. So, after college, I went there, and I studied classics. I studied Latin and Greek in college, and it was really important for me to not speak a dead language the rest of my life. Right? I mean, Latin is a dead language. It's a great language, but it is a dead one. And I just fell in love with Italy. The sounds of the language, um, the food, the people, the din of the knives on the plates as people were cleaning up after dinner on a summer night. Those kind of quotidian pleasures that Italy has did it for me 20 years ago, and did it for me a half hour ago at lunch. So yeah.
What did you, Ernest? Just so that we can continue salivating at Italian food. What did you have at lunch?
So at lunch we went to this it's kind of like a trattoria. It's called a fiaschetteria. So the fiasca, as you guys know, is that old kind of Chianti, covered glass. So he kind of predates the trattoria. And it's a good friend of mine, Andrea Borde. It's the Fiaschetteria Borde. It's just a good place. It's kind of like the Cheers of trattorie in my area. Everyone knows your name, and I had a Pisci, which is Pici. The Tuscans pronounce it Pisci, with a ragu sauce made from the white cows, the Chianina beef, which is the white cows, and a very light tomato sauce. And then I had, since I had a friend and colleague coming in from Bordeaux, I said you should try some ribollita. So ribollita is literally reboiled, and it's the cucina povera, or the country cooking of a time, which uses leftovers. So it's a little bit of leftover stale bread with vegetables that's cooked. It was just a nice light lunch, and we had a Chianti from one of my favorite areas in. I like high elevation wines. They kind of have a tension, a nervousness. I like women that are more fully formed, but I like wines that are kind of nervous and and have lots of tension. And so,
What does that mean? Is that like if you say a wine is a little tight? Is that sort of another way of saying it?
yeah, sort of, right? Kind of the components, or chemically speaking, it just has a wine that has tension, has a little bit more acidity to it, right? So it's more lively. Or, did you ever when you were a kid, did you ever take I think it's a 9-volt battery, and you put your tongue on it, right?
Oh yeah, did that? Used to do that all the time.
So
Well, that explains a lot.
I like that. I always liked that as a kid, right? I mean, that kind of I did it a lot as a kid, So
I don't know what you guys were doing when you were a kid, but I was not putting my tongue on batteries. I'll tell you that.
But I do remember doing that maybe once.
So high elevation wines, right? So this is a winery again in Rada. It's 600 meters, so you get some of that kind of that electric tension, that buzz in the wine, and I just find that invigorating, right? And as well as easily.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So.
I know Rada very well. I spent a bit of time in Tuscany myself, roaming the vineyards. Yeah. Is that one of your producers?
So Rada State is the subzone of Chianti. The producer that I had was Val delle Corti. So Val delle Corti is one of our producers. I got it from the list. I kind of wanted to check in on it, right? See how the vintage 2019 is doing. And it was delicious. I mean, we only had a half a glass each because I have to work today and all that. But it was delicious. It was a nice light lunch.
But I must say, Chianti is always one of those wines that is often hard to figure out, because there's so much of it produced, and it's so varied in terms of its style from one microclimate or sub-region to another.
Ernest, for our listeners and viewers, do you think you can kind of give us a little Chianti 101 on, grapes and region and terroir?
Sure.
And
And
Sangiovese
Yeah,
behaves so differently depending upon where it's planted.
sure. I mean, so Chianti is a word it's not a marketing word. It's not a new word. If you went to the center of Florence and you looked up in the parliament of the center of Florence, you'd see a word that said Chianti from the 1500s, right? So it's a word from a long time ago to describe a wine growing region, where nowadays it's predominantly planted with a red grape, a red variety called Sangiovese, and that's what makes up the majority of Chianti, the Sangiovese grape. There's some filler grapes like Colorino, Canaiolo, and stuff like that, but it's usually Sangiovese. So that's the first thing you should know. The second thing you should know about Chianti is kind of what you guys were saying to it, has different personalities depending on where it's grown and how you vinify it. It can kind of be kind of rustic and aggressive, right? Kind of bite you back a little bit with the tannins. It can be sexy and be a little bit more polished, a little more high end. It can be in the middle there. Again, things like altitude that we talked about before changes a lot of the wine between getting high altitude, getting kind of red fruits and maybe nettles, whereas at lower altitudes, like 250. I mean, Chianti always has hills. So there's no valley in Chianti, right? It's always hills. So a hill's around 250, 300 meters, getting a little bit mix of like red and black fruits. And so I think that's the real, that's Chianti, that's the Chianti 101. Chianti 101 part 2 would be to go into the different subzones, right? And the Italians themselves are trying to do that now, right? It's kind of, you see a lot of sommeliers when I talk to them saying, what do you think about Panzano? What do you think about Rada? Again, another subzone. What do you think about San Casciano? What do you think about Greve? So they're becoming a little bit more intellectual about it and a little bit Burgundy-ish, right? I mean, they're not trying to have the cruise necessarily, though they're trying to do that too. But, micro territories, as they say in Italian, territorio. Yeah, that's Chianti 101.
And what about the use of new oak barrels? Is that something that is happening for Chianti?
No, I think that, so if you go into a producer and you look around in their cellar, you often see these big, kind of like this room here, right? This would be the smallest you see, all cement. And that's where they would vinify, in these big cement tanks. And that's where they would have the élevage, or they would hold their wine after it was fermented. So cement's always been a big tradition in Chianti. Of course, in the 80s, it got away, and they were trying to make wines that were kind of more serious with barrique. And then you also see large wood, right? So big, bulky, right, in Chianti. I think the best producers, I mean, I'm not someone who's, you often see in the market, or people that love wines, they'll say, oh, I love a good barrique wine. Or people say, I hate barrique. I don't want to taste anything with barrique. And that's so silly, because the best producers are kind of mixing a little bit of each, right? Depending on the vintage, depending on the mouthfeel of the tannins. Again, Sangiovese is a grape with a lot of tannin, those things that bite you back. So you have to mold them into an elegant wine. It gives both structure, but it's not too wild and crazy. So I think you're seeing less and less barrique for sure. Even with the producers that were kind of high-end, the Jaguar producers, they're using even more and less barrique.
One of the great things about Chianti, though, just like all other wines, is that it goes so well with food.
Yeah.
If you pair it with the right food, pasta, all kinds of meat dishes. Wild boar is one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Oh,
I love it.
Wild boar and pasta.
Yeah.
Oh, just fantastic. With some white truffles.
And that is very, the
sprinkled on
wild
top.
boar is very...
It's got to be, you can't, that's a little bit of Americanata. You can't put the white truffles and the boar together. It's got to be one or the other. So
Yeah, Dad.
Oh,
I
it's,
mean, what are you
well,
talking? I mean, seriously,
I
what are you
put,
talking about, Dad?
it's like
well,
it's
I
like
cannot believe. Oh my
obvious,
gosh, you are messing up this
ob-
interview, Dad. You are really.
it's like wearing like father and son wearing like a tiki shirts together, right? One of you have to wear it, not both of you, right?
I
This
didn't
is
realize how gauche I was because I do combine wild boar and white
Ah,
truffle.
no, it's either one or the other. I'm telling you. To your
Well, okay.
what's a term for that in Italian? Like
we say like an Americanata, right? An American.
Americanata, Americanata.
It's like Top Gun. He's gonna get the girl. He's gonna win. He's gonna win. So it's an Americanata. It's too obvious.
It's called gilding the lily and
There you go.
being over
There
the
you go.
top. I guess. Yeah.
We're gonna
Yeah.
we want to talk a lot about how you got from America to Italy in a second, but we're gonna take a quick break and be right back.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here. If you're into swag as much as we are, then look no further than our Cocktail Guru shop. The items in our store have been personally chosen, handpicked with care by me, I'm Jonathan, and my team of Cocktail Gurus. A water bottle with a stainless steel straw? Yep. T-shirts? Hoodies? Snapback hats? Signed copies of Mr. Boston Bartender's Guide? Cocktail box kits? Bar tools? And more! You betcha! We've even managed to create a onesie for that mocktail lover in your family. So head on over to shop.thecocktailguru.com and use code GURU23 for 10% off your first order. Great deal. That's shop.thecocktailguru.com, 10% off with code GURU23. Cheers.
And now we're back.
Yeah, just
Yes.
just to latch on to what you were saying before to kind of finish that paragraph, if we will, about Chianti. You said, I think that was a good observation, saying, Chianti is great with food. I would even go further and say, Chianti without food isn't good at all. A lot of times when I'm tasting, I taste tons of samples here in Florence. One of the benefits of living here is I'm tasting all the wines that's going over to the U.S. So one before they bottle it, and then when they bottle it, I taste it again. Then we ship it over. It's just a real benefit here. So I'm tasting 30, 40 wines a day, spitting, of course. But one of the things is when I taste Sangiovese is I know I'm not tasting well. Right? I need food to taste well. It's one of those grapes. It's really hard for me to taste by itself. Does that make sense?
Obviously, you're wise beyond your years, Ernest, because I agree with you, and I've been tasting Chianti for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And I agree wholeheartedly. It just works so much better when you're having a meal.
Well, with Italian food, it's so high starch, high fat content. So that's probably what balances out the sort of.
Yeah, Chianti cuts right through that because of the acidity.
For sure. For sure. This really comes alive with food. There's real magic that happens there. And it's not always the case. A lot of times, in American culture or French, you have the kind of like, your drinks are on one side. It's kind of like the right brain, left brain thing, and the food's on the other. As we're kind of spitting out here, the marriage of food and wine, that dance of food and wine, is really intricate to the daily pleasures of not only Italian people, but a deeper understanding of Italian wine and gastronomy.
Absolutely. Now, I'm sure that your studies in the classics were partly responsible for getting you over to Italy. And
I don't know. A little bit.
No.
The women are pretty good here too, right?
No doubt about it. That's yes. I ended up in France as a student, and I certainly.
Dad, you always like to say that you moved. You went over there for primarily for the women.
Well, no. I came back with a wife.
Kidding. Yes,
I
came
did come back with a wife.
That's right. That doesn't sound great though. You came back. You came back with a wife.
not a mail order bride.
Oh gosh.
Just a girlfriend who became a wife and your mother eventually. And yes, so I understand the food, the wine, the women, all of that combines to entice one to go to either Italy or France.
So Ernest, did you go to Italy to study and then you met a woman? Is that how it happened?
Listen, I know because I taught Latin at a high school and I studied Latin Greek, but I never was, I came from a really humble blue collar family. I was going to be a motorcycle mechanic, right? I mean, I didn't have these kind of high aspirations or kind of erudite background and cultural background to go to Italy. But before I went, I think that the thing about Italy was, I always enjoy exploring. And so even though I didn't understand words like biodiversity and and all the different regions and all the different dialects, I mean, I was really ignorant and very naive. I recognized immediately that there was lots to explore here, and within an hour train ride, I could be somewhere where the buildings had just a little bit different curve to them, or the way people spoke had a different lilt, or the food had, a white sauce, or there's a different kind of pasta, or there was rice. You go in the north, they don't talk about pasta, they talk about rice, right?
Mhm.
So I really intuitively appreciated that and was drawn to that and continue to be that way to today.
Yeah, it's all about discovery. I mean, that's the beauty of
Sure.
traveling to Europe, especially as a student, because your mind is already wide open and you're ready to explore and you want to bring in new things into your mind and into your world. And it's fantastic when you can do that and learn so much about another culture and also learn about the women of the area as well
Exactly.
at the
With
same
the
time.
women.
Now you married an Italian woman.
I did. We,
Yes.
she was my, I was her boyfriend. She was my girlfriend. And I wanted to go back to the States and learn about wine. I was in Italy about 3 or 4 years. And so I went back to Oakland, California. And there was a position a friend opened up to help work in a wine shop. And I wanted to get my chops there. So we did that. But then we started, I wanted to start PortoVino. This is 15 years ago. And she had our child, who was 15 years old. Okay, I can remember all these numbers because they're all the same number. So we decided to move back to Italy, where we had the support of her family. And then where I was building a portfolio of wine producers, which I thought it was important to be close to them and talk to them about how they make wine and, whose hands did they want, their glass of wine to be in, and all kinds of stuff that was happening back then about just, again, that biodiversity, about varieties. Nowadays, the Italian wine scene, I think, is a little bit different. But back then, I mean, it really was the idea of great varieties was a big deal. Lots of people would say, "Oh, Italy's great. There's thousands of great varieties, right?" And that was the appeal to kind of explore Italy. My view on that's changed a little bit after 15 years or in current context. But again, that exploring for sure still. I married her, yes, in Italy. No, yes, we got married. Yes.
Fantastic. Good decision.
Yeah.
Great idea. And you have producers, you have several producers in Italy, and you also have a producer in Germany. I believe?
Germany and Austria.
In the Pfalz.
That's right.
In Germany.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, that's relatively recent. It's about a year and a half old, that little portfolio. Everyone wants to be a rock star importer, wine importer, and I think that was something that you did 20 years ago, and I think it was cool. But I don't think that's what people really want nowadays, is a rock star importer. I think they want someone that has a real sensitivity, has a real connection, and is humble about opening up what they know and the connections they have with producers and the way they approach wines. So I always say that I'm not a sip and spit importer, right? So I don't just sip a wine, sip 100 wines, spit them out, and choose 3, right? It takes a long time. All this to say, roundabout way, is I feel really good about my competence in Italy. I've been here for 15 years as a professional. But Austria and Germany were wines I enjoyed drinking, as an amateur, so to speak. but I didn't have the wherewithal, language, the land, producers, even kind of the wine styles. So about 3 years ago, I searched for someone to help me out, and he's become a good friend, to kind of show me the producers and stuff like that. So it's been a long project, but it's been a year and a half in the portfolio of PortoVino, just the Austrian German stuff, and I love it because it's just like all great exploring. The second stage of exploring is contrast, right? And so a cold climate like Austria and Germany gives you such a different contrast than a warm climate that Italy has, right? So if I have producers here, we're always talking about global warming and how we need more leaf cover so the alcohol doesn't get too high, and the wine becomes unbalanced or becomes too fruity or too extracted. And with Germany, it's totally different for them because they're coming from a cold climate. So they're talking about all the great benefits of global warming, right? So I'm tasting Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. I mean, amazing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from areas 10 years ago, they just couldn't have grown these kind of grapes.
Right. But traditionally, you're getting wines with much higher acidity in cold climates, but that is probably changing a bit in Germany as it is in France. But I know
still there. I just think that they more
right.
They just have more texture to them, right? There's more feel.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's also greater potential for making richer and even sweeter wines.
Yeah, for sure.
As the sunshine gets stronger and more frequent.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in Germany, there's an interesting thing going on that I'm particularly attracted to, in Austria as well, is dry wines. I mean, our portfolio, we don't have any wines with any residual sugar. They're all dry. And there's nothing wrong with residual sugar. I mean, I quite like it sometimes, but the portfolio of PortoVino is kind of very earthy, dry, mineral-driven wines. And so all our producers make wines with no residual sugar in Germany, which was kind of a new thing for the market. Not everyone kind of got it, but.
Well, I remember when Germany first started producing. This goes back a long time. Trocken wines, and I remember when that category first started gaining in popularity, and that was quite a while ago. That was more like 30 years ago, I would say.
What is that? What are Trocken wines?
Well, they're dry, no residual sugar, because in the past Germany was known for wines with residual sugar, and quite honestly, some of the greatest well, my opinion doesn't really count for much, but I happen to be a great fan of the rich, sweet, late harvest German wines. Trocken is the opposite of that. Trocken means dry with virtually no residual sugar.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you're just seeing a generation of producers that grew up drinking, I mean, to be quite honest, just Burgundy, and so they're trying to make Burgundy for themselves, right? So that's what you're saying.
Yeah, Pinot Noir has existed in Germany as it has in the region I used to represent, Alsace, for quite a while, but the styles have evolved quite dramatically.
Yeah, and they're banging it out, vintage after vintage, right? I mean, maybe again, you probably have more experience, going back historically, but every year I'm tasting wines that don't taste green, That's not
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Ernest, do you have any spirits or liqueurs in your portfolio, or is it strictly wine?
No, it's strictly wine. I've kind of dabbled in it. I really like the idea of, I like everything, right? Again, I like to explore everything. I'm as I say before, before I end up meeting people, I say, I'm happy to smell you. I want to smell you before we make a relationship, right? I hope to smell you guys someday.
That's an interesting way of phrasing it.
But for me, Italy has great. The Italian word is materia prima, right? They have the great raw material.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously with spirits, with the great raw material, you can do some amazing things. So I've dabbled in helping some people make some vermouths, some bitters, an amato. But I'm not an expert. I mean, I just, my nose knows. There's lots of different kind of extraction techniques and stuff like that to do. To put your, as they call it, I think they call it la firma, your signature on something, right? So there's the basic kind of formula. If you want to make, we want to make an amaro together, right? There's the basic formula for making an amaro, right? And then you want to put on your firma, your signature, that one little thing that makes it just a little bit different. So I've enjoyed that process. And also I've enjoyed that process. And again, I'm in territory that I'm not really competent in, but I would taste, we would taste Amaro samples with various different degrees of alcohol, and how that really changed the Amaro and the vermouth. And that's something I don't do as much with wine, right? I don't taste, wine at an alcohol range of 5 degrees. Whereas with the Amaros, I would have 20 samples of that same, proportion of ingredients over 5 degrees of alcohol. And the wine really changed, the Amaro changed quite a bit. So that was a real eye-opening experience for me. But I think Italy, again, because it is materia prima, the raw ingredients, they've got some great stuff. For example, one herb I love is elicrisso. I don't know how to say this one in English. I have to look this one up. Do you know how to say it?
What is it? Elicrisso?
Elicrisso. Did you guys ever go when you go to the beach in Italy and in the middle of the summer, and there's the it kind of looks like hay, right? They're dried out flowers, and you smell it. It's kind of like a sweet hay smell. You can smell the wind, right, when you're going along the beach. It's an herb, elicrisso. I'll look it up for you guys here. Sorry. But that's awesome. Like, not to give all my secrets away at how to make vermouth and Amaro, but you get everyone. I'm not going to actually tell you what it is in English. You should go look it up. You want to make an Amaro, you want to make it a vermouth that has an interesting signature. I would encourage you to check out elicrisso. There you go.
So one final. Oh, here I just looked it up. It's called Everlasting Flowers.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Really distinct. You smell something, and you only need to smell it once, but you can recognize it for the rest of your life. It's like that.
It's in the sunflower family, apparently.
Really?
Huh. Yeah. But I have one last question here before we wrap up. This episode will air around the beginning of the summer, so with summertime approaching and now here, what is sort of your classic go-to al fresco wine food combination?
For al fresco, wherever it is, I really enjoy, call me a hopeless romantic, but I really enjoy tasting a wine. We talked about how the alcohol changes a wine, but I really enjoy how the temperature of a wine sweating on a table changes in the glass as you pour it off, right? So, temperature really changes how a wine tastes. So whatever white wine you have or red wine you have, as it changes with the temperature, I think it's really interesting. You have a different wine in front of you almost every sip. So I think that's really cool. But I love Bottarga. Spaghetti Bottarga with a Vermentino from Sardinia is really good. Are you guys into? I don't know if you guys like Bottarga, but that's my thing.
What is Bottarga?
So Bottarga is it's like the foie gras of fish, right? It's the eggs.
Ooh. Oh yeah.
That are fermented, right? It's like the Holy Trinity is truffles, Bottarga, anchovies, right? For me, that's like the Holy Trinity. Olive oil. I'm getting into more three. I can tell you, it's got a lot of good things. But Bottarga is, you grate it, so it's fish eggs that are fermented, and you grate it on top of pasta. Then you put in like 4 to 6 drops of like lemon, just like a little bit of garlic. You take the garlic thing and put it like around the bowl you're serving it with, and it's a very, very simple dish, but it's amazingly profound, and it has tons of minerality. It's kind of like, when you're on a boat and you smack the wave and the sea breeze comes up on you, it's like that. It's a smack and some like sea breeze in your nostrils. It's wonderful. Yeah.
That sounds delicious.
Sounds fantastic.
We're super hungry and thirsty, and we're gonna go grab a little bit of food, Dad and I, right now. Ernest, this has been a very lively and informative conversation, so we appreciate your time.
I appreciate you guys. You guys are two good guys. I really hope to meet you guys someday in person and enjoy some botarga.
We hope so too, and this might just be part one of a series of interviews with you, because you are very interesting, and we thank you for your time and your effort. And we will check back with you in Italy someday soon to see what's going on.
And we will be less Americato or whatever it was, Americata.
Ciao, guys.
Ciao. Ciao.
Tipple Time is brought to you in part by Perfect Purée of Napa Valley and Glenmorangie.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Pogash here. I hope you all have been enjoying this episode of the Cocktail Guru podcast. And it is now time for a cocktail. It's always time for a cocktail in our books. This is Tipple Time, where I make you a drink. And here we go. I am on a Scotch whiskey kick, everybody. So I have my trusty old bottle of Scotch here from Glenmorangie, their Glenmorangie X. And I'm also on a Perfect Purée kick, because it's so easy to use their products. So simple, fresh ingredients. And I love them, and I've been using them for many years. So I have their sweet hibiscus here, and what I'm going to do is, I know you may be like, Jonathan, this is blasphemous. You don't even know what it is, guys. It's a margarita with Scotch whiskey. It's okay. It is not blasphemous. I'm all about experimenting, and when things work, they work, and this happens to work. So this is actually, I did a new cocktail bar, or a new restaurant, a Mexican restaurant in San Diego, in Carlsbad. Just outside of San Diego proper. And we do this hibiscus margarita that is out of this world. And I'm just taking out the tequila and adding in the Scotch whiskey in this recipe. So let's just go ahead and do it. I have 1.5 ounces here of sort of a lime juice agave nectar blend. And of course, I'm going to add my sweet hibiscus puree from Perfect Purée of Napa Valley. They do a delicious line of dozens of purees. I'm adding 1 ounce into my mixing glass. That is a beautiful, beautiful color, almost like a ruby purple. And now my Scotch whiskey, I'm doing 1.5 ounces of Glenmorangie X, which is made for mixing, by the way. And that's it. That's it, folks. Just 4 ingredients. I have my ice. Where is my ice? Oh, it's down here. Excuse me 1 second. Aha, there we go. Add some ice to my rocks glass. And now we shake. All right, let's shake. You ready? Okay. That color is just outstanding. And I'll just strain it right out into my rocks glass over here. Look at that. And garnish, I've chosen a piece of blood orange, which I'm just going to lay right along the side there, and a little piece of thyme. This is a little bit different than what we do over at Alejandra's in Carlsbad, but it's delicious, and I'm going to take a little sip. It's filled right to the brim, for those of you who can't see. See? It works. It's a Scotcherita. Guys, I recommend that you play around with the Perfect Purée of Napa Valley, their sweet hibiscus, Glenmorangie X, little lime juice, agave nectar. Mwah! Delicious. All right, and that'll do it. Cheers, everyone.
Tipple Time is brought to you in part by Glenmorangie and Perfect Purée of Napa Valley. That does it for today's show. If you enjoy what we do, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also support the show with a small monthly donation to help sustain future episodes. Just click on the donate button at the top of our website and choose your donation amount. To learn more about our guests, visit www.thecocktailgurupodcast.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok.
The Cocktail Guru podcast is produced by First Reel Entertainment and distributed by EatsDrinksTV, a service of the Center for Culinary Culture, home of the Cocktail Collection, and is available via Anchor, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, and wherever you listen to your favorite shows.